The trauma alarm didn't just sound. It tore through Riverside Veterans Medical Center like something was dying inside the walls. Midnight, Ashford, Texas, and Emily Carter was already on her feet before the second pulse hit, her body moving the way it always did when something was wrong, ahead of her brain, ahead of the fear. She was 31 years old and she walked with a limp. That was the first thing people noticed. The second thing they noticed was that she wore scrubs that were a little too plain, didn't talk much during handoff, and never pushed back when the senior staff gave her the grunt work. Third-floor storage runs, restocking wound kits, sitting with the patients nobody wanted to sit with, the ones who cried or didn't speak or smelled like they hadn't bathed in weeks. The ER at Riverside wasn't cruel exactly. It was just honest in the way that exhausted places become honest. You were useful or you weren't. You kept up or you didn't. And in the 18 months Emily Carter had worked those halls, the consensus had quietly calcified. She didn't keep up. Before you go any further, if this story already has you leaning in, follow along, hit like, and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this reaches. Now let's go back to the moment everything changed. The shift had started the way most nights did. Understaffed, overlit, the kind of fluorescent hum that got into your back teeth after hour 6. Dr. Brennan Wolfe, 29, fast-tracked, the kind of doctor who announced his own competence by the way he held a chart, had been on since 4 in the afternoon and was in the particular mood that came from being tired and believing himself above the tiredness. Emily had asked him quietly whether the patient in Bay 7 had been reassessed. The man was a 53-year-old vet who'd come in complaining of chest pressure. She'd clocked something in his breathing. Not wrong, exactly. Just off. Wolfe hadn't looked up from his phone. He's been triaged. I know, I was just... Carter. He said her name like it was a mild inconvenience. You're a floor nurse, not a diagnostician. The man has anxiety and a history of hypertension. He's been seen. She'd let it go. She almost always let it go. Charge nurse Daria Fleming had been within earshot, leaning against the station counter with a coffee she never seemed to drink. Daria wasn't mean, she was just practical to the point of coldness, and she'd been managing ER staff for 11 years, which gave her a particular kind of immunity to subtlety. You okay? She'd asked Emily, not unkindly. Fine. Don't let Wolfe get in your head. I don't. Daria had looked at her for a moment, really looked, and Emily had felt that familiar pressure behind her sternum, the one she got when someone was close to seeing something she hadn't decided to show them yet. Then Daria's radio crackled and the moment dissolved. 2 hours later, the patient in Bay 7 had coded. They'd gotten him back, but it had been close, and Dr. Wolfe had not mentioned Emily's earlier concern to anyone during the chaos. By the time the man was stabilized and transferred, the incident had been absorbed into the general noise of the night. Emily had gone to the supply room to restock. She'd stood in the cool, fluorescent quiet for a few minutes longer than she needed to, her hands on a shelf of saline bags, her eyes on nothing. The limp was worse tonight. It always got worse when she stood for more than 5 hours without a real break. The injury was old. Right thigh, deep tissue, something that had healed crooked because there hadn't been time or resources to heal it right. She didn't think about it much. It was just there, the way certain things became just there after long enough. She was carrying a box of gloves back toward the main corridor when Dr. Wolfe appeared around the corner with 2 of the overnight residents behind him. He didn't see her immediately. She heard him talking. Honestly, don't know why they keep her on nights. You need people who can move in a real emergency. One of the residents, a woman named Priya, said something Emily didn't catch. I know she's fine for stable patients, Wolfe said. That's my point. She's a stable patient nurse. The second something goes sideways, she's a liability. You can't have someone limping through a trauma bay. Emily stepped into the corridor. Wolfe saw her. His expression didn't shift much, a slight tightening around the jaw, the particular discomfort of someone who'd been caught saying something they fully intended to say, just not in front of the subject. Emily, he said, with the same tone he used for everything, even. Dr. Wolfe. She moved past them. The gloves were heavier than they should have been. She didn't look back. At 11:47, the radio at the nurse's station erupted. not the usual dispatch crackle. This was different. Layered transmissions, overlapping voices, and beneath it all, a frequency of urgency that Emily recognized the way you recognize a smell from childhood. Her body went still. Her mind went somewhere older. Daria was on the phone. One of the desk clerks, Marcus, had both hands pressed flat on the counter like he needed something to hold on to. "What is it?" Emily asked. Marcus looked at her. "Incident at Larkspur Base, some kind of explosion, multiple casualties. They're routing to us because Harmon General is already at capacity." Emily set down the box of gloves. "How many?" "They're saying they're still counting, at least 14. Could be more. Some of them are—" He stopped. "Some of them are bad." The ER began to move. That particular organized panic that hospitals do, where everyone is accelerating and talking and pulling equipment, and it looks like chaos but has a structure underneath it. Wolf was already barking instructions. The charge nurses were clearing bays. Someone was on the phone with the surgical floor. Emily moved to her station. She pulled on a fresh pair of gloves. She checked her trauma kit by feel, the way you check something you've checked 1,000 times in the dark. The first ambulances hit the bay doors 12 minutes later. They came in fast, and they came in bad. Blast injuries, shrapnel, burns. A young soldier with both hands wrapped in field dressings that had soaked through completely. An older man, sergeant's insignia still on his collar, with a chest wound that had been packed but was seeping. A kid who couldn't have been more than 22, unconscious, his vitals threading. Wolf took the sergeant. Two of the other attendings split the remaining patients. The trauma bays were full in under 4 minutes. Emily was assigned to secondary intake, helping assess the walking wounded, the ones who'd come off the transport under their own power but were holding injuries they hadn't fully registered yet. Adrenaline did that. She knew it better than she knew most things. A corporal named Desmond was sitting on a gurney near the far wall, one hand pressed to his left side, telling everyone who came near him that he was fine. His face was the color of old wax. Emily pulled up a stool. "Let me look." "I'm fine." "I know. Let me look anyway." He moved his hand. The wound wasn't large, but the angle was wrong, and the placement was worse. Emily had seen this before. Not in a hospital. In a place with no hospital anywhere near it, where you made decisions based on what you had and what you knew and nothing else. "When did this happen?" she asked. "The blast, maybe 40 minutes ago." She pressed gently around the site. He winced. "You're breathing okay? Any pressure in your chest?" "A little, but I was running." "I know." She was already standing. "Stay here." She found Dr. Keegan, one of the attendings, a solid woman who'd been at Riverside for 6 years, and pulled her aside. "Bay 12. Corporal with a lateral abdominal wound. Penetrating, I think. He's got diminished breath sounds on the left. I think there's blood in the chest cavity." Keegan looked at her. "You assessed him?" "Just a quick one. Something's wrong." Keegan moved. Emily followed. Within 90 seconds, Keegan had confirmed it. Hemothorax, early but real, and getting worse. They moved fast. A chest tube went in. The blood that drained was enough to make the resident behind Emily go quiet. "Good catch," Keegan said, not looking up. Emily didn't answer. She went back to work. The fourth transport was larger, a military vehicle, not an ambulance, olive drab, heavy-framed, with a soldier driving and 2 more in the back along with the medical team. When the doors opened, Emily was close enough to see. 4 patients, 3 of them mobile. One of them on a stretcher, big-shouldered, with a bandage over his left eye and a pressure wrap on his right forearm that had been done competently. Field done, which was different from hospital done in ways that mattered. The man on the stretcher was awake. He was tracking the environment the way trained people track environments, not looking at what was directly in front of him, but at the edges, the exits, the faces. He had a commander's insignia. What was visible of his face was weathered in a specific way. Not old exactly, maybe early 40s, but marked by the kind of accumulated exposure that didn't come from anything you could do in peacetime. 2 of his accompanying soldiers were talking to Daria. Emily moved toward the stretcher to begin intake assessment, pen already moving across the clipboard. BP, pulse. What medications have been administered en route? She stopped. The man on the stretcher was looking at her, not scanning, looking directly, with an intensity that was different from anything she'd fielded in 18 months at Riverside, different from the ordinary eye contact of a patient trying to gauge if the nurse knew what she was doing. He was looking at her the way someone looks at a face they have memorized. "Airways clear," she said, keeping her voice professional. "I'm going to assess your—" "Nightingale." The word came out low. Not a question. Emily's hand stopped moving on the clipboard. The fluorescent hum seemed louder. Somewhere across the ER, a monitor alarmed and someone called for a crash cart, and all of it felt very far away. She looked at him. She held the look for exactly 1 second, and in that second, something moved across her face that she didn't let go any further. "Your name," she said, "for intake." "Nathan Cross." His voice was rough but controlled. "Commander, Special Operations Command, Fort Larkspur." He paused. "You know who I am." She wrote his name. "I'm going to need your medication history." "Emily?" She didn't look up. "Commander Cross, how long have you been here?" 18 months. The words came out before she decided to say them. She stopped writing, looked at him. The ER was chaos around them, voices and movement, and the particular sound of urgency managed just barely, and somehow she and Nathan Cross were in a pocket of stillness that had no business existing. His jaw tightened. "They told me you were dead." "I'm not." "I can see that." The clipboard was steady in her hands because she made it steady. "You have a wound on your forearm that needs to be properly dressed, and I want to look at your eye." "Emily." "Later." She moved, professional, efficient. Her hands did what her hands knew how to do, and she did not let herself think about what he'd said, or what it meant, or the particular quality of the silence that followed her as she worked. Dr. Wolf appeared at her elbow 14 minutes later. "Carter, who's the commander? What's his status?" "Lacerations, secondary blast effects, probable mild concussion. He's stable. He should be seen by ophthalmology for the eye. There may be corneal involvement." "You assessed him?" "Initial assessment only." Wolf nodded, already moving. He introduced himself to Nathan Cross with the particular energy doctors deploy when they want to establish authority quickly, the slightly too loud voice, the clipboard held like a prop. Nathan Cross looked at Wolf for approximately 2 seconds. Then he looked past him to where Emily had moved to the adjacent bay. "I'd like to keep my current nurse," he said. Wolf paused. "She's a floor nurse. I can have one of the—" "I said I'd like to keep her." The tone had changed, not raised, not hostile, but there was something in it that was not negotiable, and Wolf, to his credit, heard it. "Of course," he said. He stepped back. He looked at Emily, and in his eyes was something she hadn't seen there before. Not respect, not yet. Uncertainty. The first flicker of a question he didn't know he should be asking. Emily came back to Nathan's bay. She finished his intake without speaking. He let her. The soldiers who'd come in with him had been treated and were clustered near the trauma bay entrance, talking quietly to one of the military liaisons who'd arrived. When Emily finally looked up from the chart, Nathan Cross was watching her with an expression that held something she recognized. The specific weight of someone who has been carrying information about you for a long time. "How did you end up here?" he asked. "I'm a nurse." "That's not what I asked." She capped her pen. "This isn't the time." "It's going to need to be a time soon." "I know." She said it quietly. She wasn't looking at him when she said it. She was looking at the ER. At Wolf, who was across the room now and glancing back at them. At Daria, who had noticed the exchange and had a look on her face Emily didn't like. At the military liaison, who was on his radio. At all the doors. Meh. The revelation didn't happen the way Emily might have expected if she'd let herself think about it in the months and years since she'd come to Ashford and made herself invisible. It happened because a private first class named Torres, 19 years old, face still red from the blast heat, sat up on his gurney and said, loud enough to carry, "Is that her? Is that really her?" He was looking at Emily. One of the other soldiers, an older staff sergeant named Braddock, turned, stared. Then something happened in his face, the same thing that had happened in Nathan's face when he'd first seen her. "Nightingale," Braddock said. It wasn't loud, but the ER was not as loud as it had been. The worst of the incoming wave having been managed, the patient stabilized or in surgery, the acute chaos tapering into the grinding maintenance phase. And Braddock's voice carried. Daria looked up. Dr. Keegan looked up. Wolf, across the room, went still. Nathan Cross sat up straighter in his bay despite the hand Emily put on his shoulder to keep him down. This woman, Nathan said, addressing the room, not performing, not making a speech, just stating fact in the way that people with command authority state fact, quietly and with the expectation that it will be heard, put on a tourniquet while she was taking fire. She called in a medevac with a radio held together with field tape. She dragged 2 of my people out of an open kill zone with a bullet wound in her leg. The ER was quiet. Her name is Emily Carter. She served with Special Operations Medical Support. She received the Combat Medic Badge, a commendation I am not authorized to discuss in a civilian setting, and a service record that was classified following an incident I am currently reporting to my chain of command. He paused. She is not just a floor nurse. She is the best field medic I have ever seen in my career. Nobody moved. Emily stood with the clipboard against her chest. She was looking at the middle distance. At nothing in particular, her expression composed in a way that required genuine effort. Dr. Wolf, who had said 6 hours ago that she was a liability, opened his mouth, closed it. Priya, the resident, was looking at Emily like she was seeing her for the first time, which Emily supposed she was. Daria set down her coffee. It was Torres, the 19-year-old, who broke the silence. She came back for Sergeant Morales, he said. She didn't have to. The extraction was already called. She went back in anyway. That's enough, Emily said. Not harshly, quietly. All of you need to rest. We have more assessments to get through, and the night isn't over. She moved back to work. Her hands were steady. The limp was there, the way it was always there. But the room moved differently around her now, gave her a different kind of space. She noticed it and didn't let herself feel it. Not yet. Because in the corner of her eye, she could see Nathan Cross still watching her, and his expression had shifted into something that was less relief and more alertness. The look of a man who has found something he was looking for and is now calculating what it means that he found it here, in this place, working nights, making herself small. The look of a man who thinks something has gone wrong that neither of them fully understands yet. She finished her notes on his chart. She checked the dressing on his forearm. She noted the time. 40 minutes later, a man she had never seen before walked through the ambulance bay doors in a suit that cost more than a week of her salary, with a hospital administrator at his side and a look on his face that was composed in the specific way of someone who has been composing his face professionally for a very long time. He scanned the ER. His eyes landed on Emily. He smiled. It was not the kind of smile that made you feel better. His name was Victor Hale, and he moved through the ER with the practiced ease of someone who had learned to treat every room like a room he already owned. The hospital administrator beside him was Gerald Fitch, a soft-faced man in his late 50s who ran Riverside's administrative operations with the particular brand of anxious competence that came from caring deeply about metrics and very little about anything else. Fitch was talking as they walked, explaining something, gesturing, and Hale was nodding without listening, his attention fixed on the far end of the trauma bay where Emily Carter stood with a chart in her hands and her back to the door. Emily felt him before she saw him. That was the only way she'd ever been able to explain it, and she'd spent years not explaining it to anyone. A change in the air, the particular quality of stillness that preceded something wrong. She turned. Hale was already smiling. "Miss Carter," Fitch said, coming to a stop at the edge of her bay. "I apologize for the interruption. This is Mr. Victor Hale. He represents Defense Coordination, Administrative Liaison." He fumbled slightly on the title, which told Emily that Fitch wasn't entirely sure what Victor Hale was, only that he had arrived with credentials that made Fitch feel he should cooperate. "We've had a significant incident tonight," Emily said. "I'm in the middle of patient follow-up." "Of course." Hale's voice was smooth without being warm. He was perhaps 55, silver at the temples, built like someone who had been athletic once and maintained enough of it to still read as capable. His eyes did the same thing Nathan's eyes had done when he'd first seen her, the immediate and specific assessment. But where Nathan's had held recognition and something like relief, Hale's held calculation. I only need a few minutes, a quiet corner, if you can spare one. Emily looked at Fitch. Fitch looked at the floor. I have a patient who needs reassessment in 20 minutes, she said. This won't take long. Hale said it the way people say things when they mean the opposite. Well, they found an empty consultation room off the main corridor, the kind of small airless space with a table and 2 chairs, and a whiteboard that still had old scheduling notes on it nobody had erased. Hale closed the door. He did not sit. Emily stood near the window, a habit, positioning, and watched him put a folder on the table without opening it. You've had an eventful night, he said. The whole hospital has. Commander Cross speaks highly of you, apparently quite publicly. He tilted his head. That must have been unexpected. I was doing my job. Of course. He paused. He let the pause sit there longer than was comfortable. I want to be direct with you, Emily. May I call you Emily? She didn't answer. There are elements of your service history that remain sensitive, classified, in fact, at levels that don't respond well to public attention. Commander Cross has always been enthusiastic. It's one of his better qualities and occasionally one of his liabilities. He smiled again, that same composed expression. Tonight, in an ER full of staff and patients, and I'm sure various personal devices capable of recording video, he shared information about you that would have been better left unshared. He told the truth about who I was. He told a version of a story. Hale's tone didn't change. There are other versions, and those other versions involve people and decisions and outcomes that are still, as I said, sensitive. People with significant interests in keeping certain things exactly as they have been. Emily was quiet. Her hands were at her sides. I'm not here to threaten you, Hale said. I know what you're doing. I'm here to have a conversation about the value of discretion, about how the choices we make in moments of visibility can have consequences for people we care about. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and produced a photograph, set it on the table between them, slid it across. Emily looked down. It was her sister, Mara, standing outside what looked like her apartment building in Callaway, the city where she'd been living for the past 3 years, teaching middle school biology. The photo was not old. The timestamp in the lower corner read 2 days ago. She looks well, Hale said. The room was very small. Emily picked up the photograph. She looked at it for a moment, really looked, not at the image itself, but at what the image was telling her, the angle, the distance. Whoever had taken it had been across the street, or further, with a lens. Mara hadn't known she was being photographed. She was carrying a bag of groceries. She was looking at her phone. Emily set the photograph back down. Stay quiet, Hale said quietly, about what you remember, about what Commander Cross may have told you tonight, or what you may tell him in turn. And she stays safe. Everyone stays safe. He picked the photograph back up and put it in his pocket. I'll let you get back to your patients. He was at the door when Emily spoke. You made a mistake coming here in person. He turned back, one hand on the door frame. You wanted to see if I'd break, she said. Whether 18 months of being nobody had softened me enough that a photograph and a smooth voice would do the job. She looked at him directly. You should have sent someone smaller. Something shifted in Hale's expression. Not much. Enough. Good night, Miss Carter, he said. He left. Emily stood in the empty consultation room for 45 seconds. She counted them. Then she went back to work. Nathan Cross was trying to get off his gurney when she returned to his bay. Don't, she said. I need to make a call. You have a probable concussion and you've been in a blast event. You need to stay horizontal. Emily, lie down. He lay down. He did it with the particular bad grace of someone accustomed to giving orders accommodating someone else's, and she found it briefly, involuntarily, almost funny. She didn't let that show. Someone came to talk to you, he said. A man named Victor Hale, administrative liaison, apparently. Nathan's jaw tightened. Hale is here? Was here. She adjusted the monitor lead on his forearm without looking at his face. He showed me a photograph of my sister. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight. Nathan's hand found the rail of the gurney and gripped it. What exactly did he say? The standard version. Stay quiet. She stays safe. He didn't say it in those words. She checked the dressing on his eye. He's smooth, practiced. He's said some version of that before. How many times have you dealt with him? I haven't, not directly. She paused. But I know who he works for. I've known for a while. Nathan sat up despite her hand on his shoulder, and this time she didn't push him back down. His good eye was focused, and the look in it was the one she remembered from the field, stripped of everything except operational clarity. You need to tell me what you know, he said. All of it. Tonight. I know what you know, most likely. The Larkspur ambush. The weapons transfer that wasn't in any official report. The 6 soldiers who died in a situation that was described afterward as an unavoidable engagement. She said it flatly. I was there for the part that happened before it became a situation. I saw what was transferred and to whom. And then someone made sure my records disappeared and I was listed as killed in a vehicle accident during a training exercise in Nevada. Nathan was very still. I figured dead was safer than visible, Emily said. So I let it be. I got a new set of credentials, quietly. I found a civilian job in a city where nobody was looking. I became a floor nurse who was too slow for real emergencies. She pulled off her gloves. Until tonight. I'm sorry, Nathan said. I shouldn't have. You told the truth. I'm not angry. She looked at him. But now Hale knows where I am, which means other people know too, and my sister is in Callaway and she doesn't know any of this. We can get someone to her. Who? I have contacts, people I trust. Do you trust them the way you trusted the chain of command that buried my file? The question landed. Nathan didn't look away from it. That's fair, he said. I need to know what's changed. Why Larkspur? Why tonight? Is this related to the explosion on the base? He nodded slowly. Preliminary is equipment malfunction, but our EOD team had flagged that munitions storage 3 weeks ago. There were inconsistencies, serial numbers that didn't match procurement records. He stopped. Same kind of inconsistencies we found before the ambush. Emily was quiet for a moment. Someone is still moving material. And someone thought an explosion would buy them time to clean up the paper trail. Nathan's voice had gone flat in a way that meant he was angry and managing it. 8 soldiers are dead, 14 in this ER, and whoever set this up is still Hale. Hale is the face. He's not the architect. Nathan's hand tightened on the gurney rail again. I've been trying to trace the original authorization for 3 years. Every thread goes somewhere and then goes nowhere. Someone senior. Someone with enough access to scrub records and enough influence to make the investigation stop at a wall. Emily thought of the photograph. The time stamp. 2 days ago, before the explosion at Larkspur. Which meant whoever had taken it had been watching Mara before tonight. Which meant she hadn't been invisible as long as she'd believed. I need a phone, she said. Take mine. Not yours. Yours is probably compromised. She moved to the door. Stay. I mean it. He stayed. She went. Marat. She found Daria in the medication room, refilling a tray with the particular focused calm that good charge nurses developed as a survival mechanism. I need a favor, Emily said. Daria looked at her. After tonight, I'm fairly open to favors. I need to make a call from a landline, not the hospital system. Something outside. A pause. My personal cell. It's in my locker. You can use it. Daria studied her. Are you in some kind of trouble? Probably. Do you need me to call anyone? Emily thought about it. Not yet. If I'm not back in the ER in 15 minutes, you can start being concerned. That's not as reassuring as you think it is. Emily was already in the corridor. She got to the locker room, found Daria's phone, a battered thing with a cracked screen protector, and dialed the number she'd spent 18 months telling herself she'd never need. A number she'd memorized the same way she'd memorized exit routes and equipment locations and all the other things she kept in the part of her brain she'd tried to wall off when she came to Ashford. It rang 4 times. Yeah. The voice on the other end was rough, careful. It's Nightingale. A long beat of silence. I thought you were dead. A lot of people did. I need to talk to Sergeant Ramirez. Is she still active? She transferred to the Inspector General's office 18 months ago. Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. IG. That was either very good or very bad. I need a number. What happened? Larkspur happened, tonight. And Hale is here in Ashford and my sister is in Callaway and someone has been sitting on photographs for at least 2 days. She kept her voice level. I need Ramirez's number and I need someone watching Mara within the next 2 hours. She could hear him thinking. The specific quality of silence on the other end of a line when someone is calculating risk. Give me 30 minutes, he said. 20. 25. He hung up. She stood in the locker room for a moment with Daria's cracked phone in her hand, thinking about Mara teaching middle school biology in Callaway, probably asleep right now, not knowing that a man with a practiced smile had a photograph of her taken from across the street. She went back to the ER. Bob. Wolf was standing near Nathan's bay when she returned, and the interaction she walked into had the particular texture of something that had not gone well. Nathan was sitting up. Wolf had a chart. Neither of them was looking at the other. Everything okay? Emily asked. Fine, both of them said, at exactly the same moment, in completely different tones. Wolf turned to her. In the hours since the incident began, something had been reorganizing itself behind his eyes. He wasn't the same version of himself that had said she was too slow for real emergencies. That version had been taken apart quietly while he watched her work, and whatever was being put back together in its place hadn't finished yet. I owe you an apology, he said. Emily looked at him. She waited. Earlier, what I said in the corridor. He wasn't good at this. His hands moved slightly at his sides like he was used to holding a chart and wasn't sure what to do without one. I didn't know it. It wouldn't have been appropriate to say it about anyone, Emily said. Not unkindly, factually. Not knowing my history doesn't change that. Wolf absorbed this. No, you're right. He nodded once, stiffly, and moved away. Nathan watched him go. That was generous. He's a young doctor who talks before he thinks. He's not the problem. She settled on the stool beside the bay. The problem is currently in a very expensive suit somewhere in this building. I want to talk about Hale. I know. What you said to me earlier, about my chain of command bearing your file. He stopped. I didn't know. I want you to understand that. After the ambush, I filed a full incident report. I flagged the weapons discrepancy. I pushed for an investigation for 8 months before I was told, at a level above my access to question, that the matter had been reviewed and closed. His voice had gone somewhere careful. When I was told you were dead, I requested to see the record. I was denied. Emily looked at him. I should have pushed harder, he said. You were in a structure that was working against you. You were in a hole in Ashford, Texas, making yourself invisible. I made a choice. A bad one. Maybe. She wasn't going to argue with him about it. The choice had kept her alive, and she'd made it with the information she had at the time, and that was the only framework any decision could be measured against. It doesn't matter now. It matters because whoever buried your file is still connected. Hale doesn't make a move like tonight, driving to an ER in person, showing you a photograph, without authorization from someone above him. That's not how he operates. Nathan's voice was quiet, but something underneath it was not. He came here to intimidate you because something about tonight scared his people. The explosion at Larkspur spooked them. I think they expected a cleaner incident, something they could control the narrative around. And instead, the hospital filled up with soldiers who know who I am. Including me. Emily looked around the ER. The initial chaos had settled into something more managed. Patients resting, monitors beeping in steady rhythms, the overnight staff moving quietly between bays. Keegan was doing rounds. Marcus at the front desk was on the phone. Daria had come back out and was writing something with the focused air of someone who was also listening. You said you recorded the conversation, Nathan said. Emily turned back to him. What? When Hale had you in that consultation room, you were in there, 6 minutes? You came out and you went straight to the medication room and you were in there 4 minutes. He watched her. Did you record it? She met his eyes. Then she reached into the pocket of her scrubs and produced a small digital recorder. The the kind that medical staff sometimes used for patient note-taking, small enough to sit flat against her palm, its red recording light covered with her thumb when she'd walked into the consultation room with Hale. Nathan looked at it, then at her. "I've been carrying that for 2 years," she said, "just in case." "That's either very paranoid or very smart." "It's both." Well, the night was changing, not improving, just changing, which was its own kind of progress. The trauma patients were mostly stabilized. 2 had gone to the surgical floor. The military liaison had set up a temporary coordination station near the ambulance bay and was cycling through radio contact with Larkspur at intervals. The ER had gone from organized catastrophe to something that merely looked like a busy night. Emily kept working, vital sign checks, medication administration, the kind of continuous, repetitive competence that people stopped noticing after a while, which was exactly what she wanted. At 3:17 in the morning, she had a 20-minute break and used it to sit in the break room with a cup of coffee she didn't want. Priya, the resident, was already in there, slouched in a chair, eyes half closed, still wearing her trauma gloves from an earlier procedure, having apparently forgotten they existed. "Can I ask you something?" Priya said, without opening her eyes fully. "You can ask." "Why a floor nurse? After everything the commander said you did, why?" "Because I needed a job that was consistent and quiet, and where nobody looked too hard at a work history with gaps in it." Emily looked at her coffee. "And because I was good at it. The job, I mean. Stable patients still need care." Priya was quiet for a moment. "Dr. Wolf said you flagged Bay 7 earlier, before the sergeant coded. I asked a question. He said you were right." Emily shrugged. "Wasn't hard to see." "He also said—" Priya stopped, reconsidering. Then, "He told us in the resident room that he should have listened, that in his assessment he'd anchored on the anxiety diagnosis and stopped looking. He said it like a teaching case." She finally opened her eyes all the way. "That's not nothing, coming from him." "He'll be a better doctor for it," Emily said. "That's the point." She finished the coffee. She went back out. But Nathan had found his phone. Someone had brought it from the military vehicle and was using it with one hand, his other arm in a temporary wrap, when Emily returned to his bay. He was on a call. When he saw her, he held up one finger. "Copy," he said into the phone. "I need that within the hour. Secure channel." He listened. "I understand. Cross out." He lowered the phone. "Ramirez," he said. Emily went very still. "What?" "Inspector General's office. She's been working the Larkspur file for 7 months. She reached out to my contact at Special Operations Command 2 hours ago. Before tonight, the explosion was already on her radar from a tip she got last week." His expression was controlled, but underneath it was something that might have been relief or might have been dread, and Emily understood that because she felt both simultaneously. She's been building a parallel investigation, quietly, below the level where it could get killed. "Does she know I'm alive?" "She does now. She's been trying to find you for 4 months." He paused. "She says Hale is the money trail. He's the one who authorized the payments that moved the weapons. She has documentation, partial, but enough to open a formal investigation. Partial isn't enough to stop what he can do tomorrow." "I know. She's working on full." He looked at her. "She asked if you'd be willing to testify, formally, under federal protection." The break room was behind her. The ambulance bay was ahead. Somewhere in this building, Victor Hale was probably still present, or had people still present, or had already made calls that had set things in motion. Somewhere in Callaway, Mara was asleep in an apartment while a photograph existed that showed her standing on a sidewalk, not knowing she was being watched. Emily thought about 18 months of being invisible, of getting good at small, at quiet, at taking up as little space as possible while still doing the work that needed to be done. She thought about Nathan Cross saying she should have pushed harder and knowing he was right without needing to say so. "Yes," she said. "I'll tell her." He dialed. Emily moved to the window at the far end of the trauma bay. She looked out at the ambulance bay, the heavy vehicles still parked at odd angles from the night's rush, the bay lights throwing hard yellow circles on the pavement. A security guard was making his rounds. An overnight maintenance worker was moving a cart past the far doors. And there, beside the maintenance worker, not pushing anything, not moving with any particular urgency, simply standing with a hand in his jacket pocket and his eyes on the hospital entrance, there was a man she didn't recognize, not staff, not a patient, not press. She watched him for 30 seconds. He didn't move. His eyes tracked the entrance with the specific patience of someone waiting for a particular thing and willing to wait as long as necessary. She was about to turn to Nathan when her borrowed pager, Daria's hospital-issued backup that she'd clipped to her scrubs, buzzed. She looked at it. The message was 3 words, from a number she didn't recognize, to Daria's hospital pager that nobody outside the hospital system should have been able to reach. Check your phone. Emily's hand moved to her pocket before she remembered she'd returned Daria's phone after the call. She crossed the ER in 20 seconds, found Daria near the medication station. "Did you get a message?" Emily asked. Daria frowned. "My personal cell? I turned it to silent. What?" She pulled it from her pocket, looked at the screen. Her expression shifted in a way that Emily had never seen on Daria's face before. The particular expression of someone looking at something they don't understand and finding that frightening. She held up the phone. The screen showed a single photograph. New. Time-stamped 40 minutes ago. Mara Carter's apartment building. Front entrance. And at the base of the frame, just visible at the edge, 2 pairs of shoes belonging to men standing in the shadow of the doorway. Waiting. Emily looked at the photograph for 3 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. 2 pairs of shoes. Men standing in the shadow of Mara's doorway at 3:40 in the morning. Not knocking. Not leaving. Just waiting with the particular patience of people who had been told to wait and had no reason to believe anything would stop them. "Is that your sister's building?" Daria asked. "Yes." "Do you need me to call—" "Not the police." Emily was already moving back toward Nathan's bay. "Not yet." She heard Daria behind her, not following, just standing there holding her phone with the expression of someone who has just realized that the quiet nurse they've worked beside for a year and a half is standing at the center of something large and very dangerous, and that by proximity, so are they. Nathan saw her face when she was still 10 feet away. He was already lowering his phone. What happened? She told him in 12 words. Photograph. Her building. 2 men in the doorway. 40 minutes ago. He was on his phone before she finished. Dialing, not texting. The specific decision of someone who needed a voice confirmation and needed it now. He turned slightly away, his voice dropping, and Emily caught fragments. Callaway, confirmed address. 2 subjects. "Do not wait for my call back. Move now." He lowered the phone. "I have people 20 minutes from her building." 20 minutes is a long time. "It's what I have." He looked at her steadily. "She's still in the apartment?" "As far as I know." "Then they're holding position. They're not moving on her yet. They're leverage. If they wanted to move, they would have moved before the photograph was sent." "Someone sent that photograph to warn me." "Or to control you." Nathan's jaw was tight. "The photograph to Hale's pager number that came from inside the hospital system. Someone here has access they shouldn't have." Emily thought about the man she'd seen outside the ambulance bay. The patient posture, the eyes tracking the entrance. "There's a man in the ambulance bay," she said. "I noticed him 20 minutes ago. Not staff, not press." Nathan stood up. He did it carefully, the way someone does when they're managing pain they're not going to mention. "Where?" "South End, near the maintenance corridor. Dark jacket." He was already looking past her toward the bay windows. "I need to make another call. Ramirez. She needs to know Hale has people inside the hospital network. She needs to know something else." Emily reached into her scrubs pocket and produced the digital recorder. "She needs this." Nathan took it. He looked at it for a moment. "This is enough to open formal proceedings." "Is it enough to get my sister out of that doorway?" "Combined with what she already has, yes." He was dialing again. "Give me 2 minutes." She gave him 2 minutes. She used them to do the only thing she could do, which was go back to the floor and work, because the patients didn't stop needing care because her sister was in danger, and a man in an expensive suit was somewhere in the building, and the thing she'd been running from for 3 years had finally caught up to her current address. Corporal Desmond, the hemothorax patient who'd been stabilized earlier, was awake in his bay and trying to read something on a phone someone had brought him. His color was better. The chest tube was draining correctly. Emily checked the output, checked his vitals, adjusted his positioning slightly without being asked. "How are you doing?" she asked. "Better than I should be, from what I hear." He looked at her directly. "You caught that, didn't you? The chest thing." "Dr. Keegan caught it." "I heard what the commander said about you." Desmond was quiet for a moment. "You were at the Kandahar rotation, weren't you?" She didn't answer. "My older brother was there. Different unit. He talked about a medic, a woman, who came back into a hot zone for Sergeant Morales." He studied her face. He said she went in with a rifle she couldn't fire because her hand was damaged, and she dragged Morales 200 meters to the extraction point and didn't stop moving even after she got hit again. Emily checked the chest tube drainage one more time, a task that did not require checking. "Your brother came home?" she asked. "Yeah." "Good." She moved on. At 4 in the morning, Nathan found her in the corridor outside the medication room and said, "Ramirez is mobilizing." Emily turned. His face had the look of someone carrying two things simultaneously and managing neither comfortably. "What does that mean specifically?" "She's been coordinating with the FBI field office in Harmon for 6 weeks. They've been building toward a formal arrest warrant for Hale, but they needed something direct. A recorded threat, ideally." He held up the small recorder. "This gets them there. She's requesting emergency authorization to execute tonight." "Tonight." "Hale is here?" "In Ashford. She doesn't want to wait for him to move." "What about Mara?" "My contact confirms 2 people reached her building. They're watching the entrance. Mara is inside. They did a visual confirmation through the lobby camera. She's asleep." He paused. "My people are on site. They'll hold position until Ramirez's team can coordinate with local law enforcement for a pickup." "Pickup of the men watching the building." "Simultaneous with Hale's arrest, if the timeline works." Emily looked at the ceiling for exactly 1 second. The math was not comfortable. A simultaneous operation across 2 cities depended on timing, that depended on communication, that depended on federal authorization processes that were not known for being fast at 4 in the morning. "What if the timeline doesn't work?" she asked. "Then we improvise." He said it the way people say things when they've improvised enough times that the word has lost its casual edge and picked up something heavier. "Ramirez says 45 minutes to authorization, maybe less. Hale knows I have the recorder." Nathan went still. "What?" "He's smart enough to know I would have recorded that conversation. He came in person, which was already a risk, and he had to know I'd cover that risk somehow." She watched his expression. "He's not waiting on us. He's already moving on whatever his next step is." Nathan pulled out his phone and made a call. While he was on it, Emily thought about the sequence. Hale arriving here not as a threat, but as a test, to see what she'd do, to see if the 18 months had changed her, and when she'd passed that test wrong by telling him he'd made a mistake, he'd activated the next layer. The men outside Mara's building, the inside access to the hospital pager system, the man in the ambulance bay. She went to the bay windows and looked out. The maintenance worker's cart was still there. The security guard had moved on in his rounds. The spot where she'd seen the man in the dark jacket was empty. He'd moved. She was reaching for Nathan's arm when the fire alarm went off. Not a real fire. She knew within 15 seconds, moving through the controlled spike of adrenaline that a sudden alarm in a hospital at 4 in the morning produced in everyone simultaneously. The alarm was in the East Corridor, the administrative wing, a section that at this hour contained almost no patients, only offices and storage, and, as of earlier tonight, the consultation room where Victor Hale had sat across from her and slid a photograph across a table. The protocol was immediate and institutional. Staff moved patients away from the Eastern Corridor. Wolf was already directing residents. Keegan appeared from somewhere and took over the trauma bay assessment. Daria was on the desk phone, voice level, coordinating with hospital security. Emily moved toward the East Corridor. Nathan's hand caught her arm. "That's a diversion." "I know. Don't go in there alone." "I'm not." She looked past him to where Braddock, the staff sergeant who'd recognized her earlier, who was ambulatory and had refused to stay in his assigned bay for the last 2 hours, was standing against the wall watching the controlled chaos with the assessing look of a man who knew what diversions looked like from the inside. She met his eyes. He straightened. She tipped her head toward the east corridor. He understood immediately, the way trained people understand signals that don't require words, and moved to her left side, and the three of them went into the east wing while everyone else was moving out of it. The smoke was thin and chemical, something small burning in a trash receptacle or a heating vent, the kind of thing that set off sensors without being a genuine emergency. Through the haze, the corridor was empty. Doors closed. The consultation room where she'd met Hale was at the far end. It was open. Emily moved to the left side of the corridor, Nathan to the right, Braddock behind. The door to the consultation room stood at an angle that prevented a direct line of sight until you were within 4 feet of it. Standard approach. She took the angle, came around low, and stopped. The room was empty. But on the table where nothing had been left was a manila folder, clean, crisp, placed there deliberately, not forgotten. Left. Emily stepped in. Braddock stayed at the door. Nathan came around her right shoulder. She opened the folder. It was a document, not handwritten, printed, formal, the header bearing the insignia of an office she recognized from her service record. 3 pages. The top of the first page read, Official Record. Carter, Emily L. Status, deceased. And below the official record, clipped to it with a single metal clip, was a second document, a transfer of medical license. Her name, a hospital in Callaway. Callaway, where Mara lived. He's offering you a relocation, Nathan said very quietly. He's offering me a choice. Emily looked at the documents. Disappear again, this time to Callaway, where he can watch both of us. Or he executes whatever comes next. She thought about the men at Mara's doorway, the man from the ambulance bay who'd moved, the fire alarm that was a diversion, but a diversion for what? Not for this. This was too small, too personal. The diversion was for something else happening somewhere in the building simultaneously. She looked at Nathan. Where is Hale right now? I don't know. Find out. She left the folder on the table. She walked back into the east corridor and pulled out the closest house phone and dialed the security desk. This is Carter from the ER. I need the location of a visitor logged in tonight. Victor Hale, Administrative Liaison. He should be in the visitor registry from around midnight. Hold, keys clicking. Miss Carter, Mr. Hull signed out at 3:52. 16 minutes ago. She set down the phone. The fire alarm was still cycling, 3-beat pulse, the sound of it pressing down on the corridor. Nathan was behind her. He's gone, she said. Then whatever he came to set in motion is already running. Emily's pager went off. Not Daria's borrowed one, her own hospital issue, the one clipped to her left hip that she'd been carrying for 18 months. She looked at it. The number on the screen was Nathan's, but the message wasn't. We have her. Don't call anyone. Wait for instructions. The next 11 minutes were the worst kind. The kind where you know that every action has a cost and inaction has a higher one, and none of the math resolves cleanly. Emily stood in the east corridor with the pager in her hand. Nathan had his phone to his ear, jaw tight, waiting. Braddock was watching both of them with the particular expression of someone who's identified that the situation has changed and is waiting for updated information. My contact lost visual on Mara's building, Nathan said. 3 minutes ago. Both subjects outside the entrance moved before the team was in position. They got inside. Through the parking structure. There's a connecting access door to the lobby. His voice was carefully controlled. My people are at the entrance. They can go in. If they go in and something goes wrong, she stopped. I know. Ramirez, where is she? 20 minutes from authorization, maybe less. 20 minutes. The word authorization had never felt so heavy and so useless simultaneously. 20 minutes was a policy timeline that existed in a world where the person being threatened had 20 minutes. Emily looked at the pager again. Wait for instructions. That meant a call was coming. That meant whoever had Mara was expecting her to be reachable and stationary, which meant they didn't know she was standing in a hospital corridor with a decorated special operations commander and a staff sergeant who'd offered no indication of planning to leave. "Can Ramirez call them directly?" Emily asked. "Whoever has Mara. She doesn't have identification on the individuals yet. She has Hale. Hale isn't in custody. She has the recorder. She has enough for a phone call. A direct contact, FBI credentials, telling whoever took Mara that federal investigators are active and the next 30 seconds are the last window to stand down." Emily looked at Nathan. People on the operational end of something like this, drivers, watchers, the men at the door, they're hired. They're not true believers. If a federal agent calls them directly and tells them the principal has been arrested, most of them cut their losses. Nathan's expression shifted. "That only works if Hale is actually in custody." "I know." A beat. "Ramirez needs to move on Hale now," Emily said, "without waiting for full authorization. That's a significant ask. It puts the whole investigation at risk if the warrant isn't clean." "And waiting puts my sister at risk." They looked at each other. The fire alarm continued its 3-beat rhythm. "She might do it," Nathan said slowly, "if she believes the chain of evidence is solid enough to survive a procedural challenge." He held up the recorder. "This plus what she has, call her." He called her. Emily walked to the end of the corridor while he talked. She stood at the window that looked out over the hospital's west parking lot, a different angle from the ambulance bay, quieter, the lot half empty at this hour. The streetlights threw long orange shapes across the pavement. A car was idling near the far exit. She couldn't see the driver. The engine light was on, a faint orange glow. The car wasn't moving. It had been there when she first walked to the window. It was still there 2 minutes later. Hale had signed out of the hospital at 3:52, but signing out of the building didn't mean leaving the parking lot. She went back to Nathan. "Ramirez is moving," he said. "She's calling Hale directly, identifying herself, federal credentials, informing him that he's under investigation and that she has recorded evidence of his threat made tonight inside Riverside Veterans Medical Center. She's giving him 30 seconds to instruct his people to stand down, or she executes the warrant and adds obstruction and kidnapping to the existing charges." "How long ago did she call?" 90 seconds. The pager in Emily's hand buzzed again. She looked at it. A different number this time. One she didn't recognize, with a Callaway area code. The message read, "She's safe. Don't come here." Emily read it twice. She had no way to verify it. The message could be genuine, someone standing down, or it could be designed to keep her stationary. She looked at Nathan. "My contact," he said, phone at his ear again. "Hold, hold." He listened. His expression changed. "Confirmed. Both subjects left Mara Carter's building through the parking structure. They're in a vehicle heading northeast on Ridgeline Avenue. My team has eyes on them and is following." He lowered the phone. "She's okay." Emily's hand closed around the pager. She pressed it flat against her palm and stood with it there for a moment, feeling the plastic warm against her skin. "Okay," she said. It wasn't relief. Not yet. Relief was a thing that came when the situation was fully resolved, and nothing about this situation was fully resolved. But the specific worst fear, the one that had been sitting behind her sternum since she'd seen those 2 pairs of shoes in the photograph, loosened its grip slightly. "Hale," she said. "Ramirez has him on the phone. She's—" Nathan's own phone buzzed. He read the screen. Something moved in his expression. "She has a visual on his vehicle. He's in your hospital parking lot." Emily was already walking. But she went through the east corridor, back through the main ER, out through the ambulance bay, and across the ambulance apron before anyone thought to stop her. Braddock was behind her. Nathan, who should not have been moving at this pace with a head wound, was keeping up anyway with the particular stubborn competence of someone who had learned to perform through worse. The west parking lot. The idling car near the far exit. She came around the corner of the building and stopped. 3 federal vehicles, unmarked but obvious in the way federal vehicles are always obvious, had boxed in a silver sedan near the exit barrier. Men in jackets were out of the vehicles, positioned with the practiced geometry of a trained arrest. The driver of the silver sedan had not attempted to move. The engine was still running. Victor Hale was in the back seat, not the driver's seat. The back seat, which meant he hadn't driven himself, which meant there was a fourth person who had been there the whole time and who was now, Emily looked, being brought out of the driver's door with his hands visible and moving slowly, the way people move slowly when they'd decided the math no longer worked in their favor. Hale's door opened. A woman in a dark jacket, 40s, compact build, the specific air of someone who'd been doing this long enough to have stopped performing it, said something Emily couldn't hear. Hale looked past her. His eyes found Emily across the parking lot. His composed expression was gone, not broken. Men like Hale didn't break visibly, but it had slipped, the way something slips when the weight behind it has shifted suddenly, and the architecture that was holding it in place is no longer reliable. Emily held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she looked at the woman in the dark jacket. "Ramirez?" "Carter." The woman's voice was level. "You're all right." "I'm fine. I need your statement tonight, if you're able, and the recording." She glanced at Nathan. "Commander Cross, you need to be in a hospital bed." "I'm in a hospital parking lot," Nathan said. "It's adjacent." Ramirez looked at him for a moment. Then, barely, the corner of her mouth moved. "Your statement, too." She turned back to the vehicle. 2 of her people were putting Hale in one of the federal cars, the efficient and impersonal process of arrest that had no drama in it, only procedure. He didn't struggle. He didn't speak. He got in the car the way a man got into a car when he'd calculated the next 20 moves, and found that all of them still required staying alive and staying capable, which meant this was not the end for him, only a change of position. Emily knew that feeling. She'd had it herself once, standing in a hospital in Ashford, Texas, making herself invisible. She also knew that it wasn't always right. Sometimes the situation actually was as finished as it looked. "There's more," she said to Ramirez. Ramirez turned back. "I know. Hale is the money trail. You said that to Nathan. He's not the architect." "I know that too." Ramirez's expression didn't change. "We've been working the source for months. The Larkspur explosion tonight gave us new material. EOD found serial number discrepancies in the munitions storage. I have a forensic accounting team pulling financial records tied to the procurement chain." She paused. "The name at the top of that chain is someone I haven't been able to touch, because he's been careful enough and remote enough that every thread stops 1 level below him." "What's his name?" Ramirez looked at her for a moment. The parking lot was cold. The kind of cold that came in the hours before dawn in Texas, when the heat had finally drained from the pavement and there was nothing left to hold the temperature up. "Voss," Ramirez said. "Retired Colonel Adrian Voss." Emily had never heard the name before. That itself was meaningful. She'd been thorough, in the quiet years, in learning what she could learn from the position of someone who was supposed to be dead. She'd identified Hale. She'd reconstructed the payments. She'd traced the Larkspur ambush back to a deliberate decision made by someone with command-level access to operational planning. She'd never found a name. "How far up?" she asked. "High enough that his retirement package came with the right kind of friends." Ramirez's voice was flat. "He's been out of uniform for 4 years, but he maintained access through a defense consulting firm. The firm holds contracts with 3 different federal agencies. He's untouchable in the normal sense. Too many overlapping relationships. But normal sense doesn't apply anymore. Tonight changed the exposure level significantly." She glanced at Nathan. "Your commander's public identification of you, combined with the Larkspur explosion and the arrest of Hale. Voss is going to know that the walls have moved. He'll try to do something about it." "What kind of something?" Ramirez was quiet for a beat. Around them, the arrest was being completed, radios going, a second vehicle beginning to move out of the lot. "The kind of something that makes evidence and witnesses disappear," she said. "Which is why I need your formal statement tonight. I need Commander Cross's statement, and I need everyone connected to this situation in a protected location within the next 6 hours." "You think he'll move that fast?" "I think he's already moving." She looked at Emily directly. "He's been 4 steps ahead for 3 years. The only thing that changes that equation is that he doesn't know what you know or what Cross told you or what's on that recording, but he'll try to find out. And when he finds out..." Emily's pager went off again. She looked down. Not the hospital number, not Nathan's, not the Callaway area code, a number she didn't recognize with no area code at all. Just digits. 11 of them, which was one too many for a domestic number. The message was 4 words. I know you're outside. The parking lot was empty except for Ramirez's people and the last federal vehicle pulling out, and Nathan Cross standing to her right with his hand pressed to his temple, and Braddock behind her left shoulder, and the orange glow of the streetlights making long shadows across the pavement. Emily looked up slowly. At the roofline of the hospital's west wing, at the parking structure adjacent to it, at the building across the street, a medical office complex, dark at this hour, every window black except for the 3rd floor, second window from the left, where a light was burning. In the window, barely visible against the interior light, a shape, a person, standing still, watching. Ramirez followed Emily's eye line. Her hand went to her radio. Emily's pager buzzed one more time. Tell Ramirez she has 30 seconds before I send her something she'll spend the rest of her career trying to explain. Ramirez had her radio up before Emily finished the thought. 3rd floor, second window, building across the street. Her voice was flat and fast. I need eyes on that position now. Do not approach. Do not announce. Just confirm occupancy and hold. One of her agents was already moving. Ramirez looked at the pager in Emily's hand and took it without asking, read both messages, handed it back. He's been watching the parking lot, Emily said. He had eyes on Hale's arrest. Ramirez's jaw was tight, which means he knew we were coming for Hale and he let it happen. Nathan understood it at the same moment Emily did. He sacrificed Hale. Hale was always expendable. Ramirez was already walking toward the building entrance, not running, the specific controlled pace of someone managing a situation that was moving faster than she wanted. Voss cut him loose because Hale became a liability the moment he walked into this hospital and made a direct threat on record. Voss doesn't make direct threats. He makes architecture. What did he send you? Emily asked. He hasn't sent anything yet. Ramirez's radio crackled. She listened. Confirmed 1 occupant, 3rd floor, second window. Male, seated, does not appear to be armed, but the angle is limited. She keyed the radio. Hold position. Do not move in. Why not? Braddock said from behind Emily. It was the first thing he'd said in 20 minutes, and it landed with the directness of someone who'd been listening carefully and had reached his patience limit. Because if Voss is sitting in a lit window in a building across from a federal arrest he just watched happen, he's not hiding, Ramirez said. He wants us to know he's there, which means going in on our terms would be doing exactly what he wants us to do. She stopped walking and turned to face all of them. He said 30 seconds before he sends me something I'll spend the rest of my career explaining. That message came in 4 minutes ago. He's bluffing, Braddock said. Maybe. Ramirez didn't sound convinced. Or he has something, documentation, recordings, fabricated evidence, that implicates people in my chain of command or in this investigation, and releasing it would compromise everything we've built. She looked at Emily. People like Voss don't spend 4 years building insulation without exit options. The real question is whether his exit option is that window or somewhere else entirely. Emily was looking at the building. 3rd floor, second window. The shape was still there, not moving, just present, in the specific way of someone who had made a calculated decision to be visible. He knows I'm here, she said. Yes. He doesn't know what I know. No, but he's trying to figure it out. Ramirez studied her. What do you want to do? The question surprised her slightly. Not its content, but its directness. The way Ramirez asked it, like Emily's answer, was the relevant data point. Like the federal investigator with the warrant and the credentials and the agents was genuinely deferring to the floor nurse from the Ashford ER. Emily thought about it for 3 seconds. Give me your phone. She dialed the number from the pager. The 11-digit number that was one too long for domestic use, but that she'd already identified as a satellite relay. The kind of number that bounced through enough intermediaries to make the point that the person on the other end was not concerned about being traced. It rang once. Emily Carter. The voice was older than she expected. Measured cadence, mid-Atlantic accent that had the faint residue of military formality underneath it. Not the voice of someone panicking, the voice of someone who had been planning this conversation for some time. You're standing in the parking lot. You can see me. I can see you. A pause. You look well for someone who's been dead for 3 years. I've been working on my cardio. A short sound. Not quite a laugh. I appreciate the composure. I really do. Hale said you wouldn't break. I thought he was being sentimental. Another pause. And in it, Emily heard the quality of a man reassessing. He was right. He's in a federal vehicle right now. I know. I watched. Not a flicker of concern in his voice. Victor served his purpose. He was very good at certain things, and not good at others, and this evening fell into the second category. His tone was the tone of someone discussing a middling quarterly report. You recorded the conversation? Yes. That was smart. I would have done the same. He paused again. I want to offer you something, Emily. Not a threat. I think we're past that. A genuine offer. I'm listening. There's a file. It's held in 3 separate locations, each accessible only through a dead man's system that activates if I don't reset it every 48 hours. The file contains documentation that would be damaging, not to you, to people your investigator cares about, people in her chain of command who made decisions in the past that they wouldn't want examined under the current political climate. His voice was even. I have no personal interest in releasing that file. I built it as insurance, not as a weapon. If I walk out of this city tonight, the file stays where it is. Nobody sees it. The people it covers go on with their lives. And the soldiers who died in the Larkspur ambush? A beat. The first real pause. Not calculated, just present. That was a regrettable outcome, he said. The 3 words were so inadequate that Emily didn't answer them. She let the silence sit on the line between them. I had operational targets, Voss said. The ambush was a deviation that my people managed badly. I did not order those deaths. You ordered the weapons transfer that created the conditions for them. I ordered a strategic assets movement that served a larger objective. His voice had picked up the faint edge of someone who has defended this position internally for a long time and has run out of patience for the version of it that requires admission. You were a medic, Emily. You understand operational reality. You understand that decisions made at a command level have costs, and that those costs sometimes don't. She said it quietly, but it stopped him. Don't do that. Those men had names. I knew some of them. The line was quiet. Walk away, he said. Let me walk away. The file stays buried, Ramirez's people are protected, your sister is safe, and you go back to whatever this is. His voice shifted slightly. You've been invisible for 3 years. You're good at it. This is a version where everyone who matters gets to keep living. Except the people the file is about. Those people made choices. So did the soldiers in the ambush. Another silence. Longer. I can't make this right, he said, and for the first time she heard something in his voice that wasn't calculation, just a tired man saying a true thing. I know that. But I can make it not worse. Emily looked up at the window. The shape was still there, backlit, motionless. I'll call you back in 10 minutes, she said. She ended the call before he could respond. Inta. Ramirez was watching her. Nathan was watching her. Even Braddock, who maintained the professional bearing of someone not invested in the outcome, was watching her. He has a dead man file, Emily said. Documentation on people in your chain of command. He says it releases automatically if he doesn't reset it every 48 hours, and he'll walk if you agree not to pursue. Ramirez's expression didn't change. Is it real? I don't know. He said it carefully enough that I believe he believes it's real. He's been careful about everything else. Ramirez turned slightly away, her hand on her radio, thinking. If the file is real and he releases it, what happens to this investigation depends entirely on who it covers and what it says. I have people I trust completely, and people I trust conditionally, and people I don't trust at all, and I can't know from here which category his targets fall into. He's counting on that uncertainty, Nathan said. Yes. Ramirez's jaw tightened. He's built his insulation out of other people's uncertainty for 4 years. Every time someone got close, there was a reason to slow down. A thread that led somewhere complicated, a cost that made the math look wrong. She looked at Emily. What did you tell him? That I'd call back in 10 minutes. Why 10 minutes? Because I needed to tell you what he said and then decide what to do. Emily held Ramirez's gaze. He's sacrificed Hale. He's willing to give you Hale, the money trail, the financial documentation, all of it. If he walks, that's not nothing. It closes most of your case. It doesn't close the ambush. No. 8 soldiers. I know. Ramirez was quiet for a moment. Can you get him to talk more? On the line? Emily understood what she was asking. You want to record it. I want him to say things into a phone that is currently in the possession of a federal agent and is therefore legally recorded under the active investigation warrant I have in my pocket. Ramirez's voice was careful and precise. I want him to repeat what he just told you about the weapons transfer and the operational objectives, and the ambush being a deviation, in his own words, on record. Emily looked at the phone in her hand. She thought about what that conversation would require. Keeping Voss engaged, letting him believe she was negotiating in good faith, drawing out the specific language that would nail the coffin shut without letting him know that's what was happening. It was, in its way, the same as going back into the kill zone for Morales. The same calculation. The same decision made with the information available. Give me the warrant documentation, she said. I want to see exactly what's covered before I make the call. Ramirez produced it. Emily read it. It took 4 minutes. The warrant was comprehensive, broader than she'd expected, which meant Ramirez had been building this longer and more carefully than she'd let on in the parking lot. The scope covered financial crimes, conspiracy, obstruction, and specifically named the Larkspur ambush as a predicate event under federal statutes that applied to crimes against military personnel. She handed it back. Okay. She dialed. He answered on the first ring. He'd been waiting, which told her something. You took 12 minutes, he said. I was reading a document. She began walking, slowly, away from Ramirez and Nathan. Not far, just enough to look like she was having a private conversation rather than a coordinated one. I want to understand the file, the dead man's system. How does it work exactly? He told her. He was precise and detailed, the way people were precise and detailed when they wanted you to understand that they weren't bluffing. And in his precision, he gave her 3 things: the nature of the documentation, the general category of individuals covered, and the fact that the reset window was 48 hours, not 24, which meant the current reset had happened yesterday. How many people know about the file? She asked. 2. Myself and the person who built the storage architecture. And if you're in federal custody? The reset doesn't happen. In 48 hours, the file goes to 6 different recipients simultaneously. He paused. This is why walking away is the rational solution. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at the math. The math includes 8 dead soldiers. The math includes 8 dead soldiers and also 23 people in active federal service who would lose their careers and potentially their freedom based on decisions that were made in a different context under different pressures. His voice had regained its composure. None of them are villains, Emily. They're people who made choices I gave them reasons to make. So did the soldiers in the ambush. They made the choice to serve. A pause. Yes. And you put them in a position where serving meant dying so that your weapons transfer could proceed without scrutiny. He didn't answer that immediately. The silence stretched in a way that told her he was deciding how much truth was still useful. The transfer was supposed to be clean, he said finally. The ambush wasn't part of the plan. Someone on the receiving end got nervous and made a decision that I wasn't informed of until after. But you covered it up. I protected the operation. There's a difference between those 2 things. You know that. Another pause. Yes, he said quietly. There is a difference. Emily looked at the window across the street. She could see him now, more clearly. An older man, white hair, seated at a table near the window with a phone to his ear. He was looking out at the parking lot, at her, at the shape of her in the orange streetlight. You let them bury my file, she said. You let them list me as dead. You were a witness. I was a medic. You were a medic who saw the transfer and who would have reported it. The decision to remove you from the official record was made by someone below me, without my authorization. He said it like it should mean something. I found out afterward. And you let it stand. He didn't answer. Colonel Voss. She used his title for the first time. How many things went wrong that you let stand because fixing them cost more than the original problem? The line was quiet for a long time, long enough that she thought he might have hung up. More than I intended, he said. When I started, the objective was legitimate. The operation served a real strategic purpose. The transfers were gray area, not criminal. But once you're in gray area far enough, the cost of stepping back into the light becomes higher than the cost of going further in. He paused. That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. No, she said. It's not. My offer stands, he said. Walk away. Ramirez holds the case where it is. Hale, the financial trail, the documentation she already has. I disappear. The file doesn't release. In 5 years, when the dead man system expires, none of this matters anymore. Emily was quiet for 3 seconds. I can't do that, she said, because of the soldiers. Because of the soldiers, and because of the next time. Because men like you don't stop at one gray area. She kept her voice level. You're under active federal investigation, Colonel. Whatever your file contains, Ramirez is better equipped to manage it than you're assuming. Turn yourself in. The silence that followed was the longest one yet. You're not calling me back, he said. You're recording this call. She didn't confirm or deny it. And you kept me talking, he said slowly, while someone did something on the ground that I'm not seeing yet. He hung up. Sub. Ramirez was on her radio the moment the call ended. Move on the 3rd floor now. Go. Emily looked at the window. The shape, Voss, was still there, but it had changed. He'd stood up. He was moving away from the window toward the interior of the office space, and his pace was not the controlled walk of someone executing a plan. It was the pace of someone adjusting to a plan that had shifted. She ran. Not toward the building across the street. Ramirez's people were already going in that entrance, and adding herself to a federal entry wasn't useful. She ran back through the ambulance bay, through the ER, past Daria, who said something she didn't catch, through the east corridor and out the hospital's north exit, which brought her to the side street between Riverside's north wing and the medical office complex. The side street was narrow and poorly lit. A service entrance to the office building faced the hospital's north exit, a utility door currently propped open with a cleaning cart. She went through it. The building's interior smelled of industrial cleaner and old carpet, emergency lighting only in the stairwell. She took the stairs because the elevator would announce itself. 3rd floor. She came through the stairwell door into a corridor that had the specific after-hours emptiness of a building that had people in it doing something they'd rather not have noticed. Ramirez's people were at the far end. She could hear them, controlled voices, the knock-announce of a federal entry. She moved toward the second window from the left and found the office door unlocked. The room was empty, not recently vacated, immediately vacated. A folding table, a laptop with the screen still on but displaying a lock screen, a satellite phone different from the one he'd used to call her, and a thermal travel mug still warm when she touched it. The window was open 2 inches, not enough to climb out, just enough to get air and see the parking lot. The laptop screen showed a countdown, numbers cycling down from something that had started at 30 minutes and currently read 14 minutes 23 seconds. She stared at it. Not the dead man file. This was something else, something he'd had running before the phone call, before the arrests, before tonight's operation had moved into its current phase. The countdown had started around the time the FBI vehicles were boxing in Hale's sedan. Ramirez came through the door behind her, took one look at the screen. "What is this?" she said. "I don't know, but it started 30 minutes ago." Ramirez's hand was already on her phone. "I need a forensic tech on the 3rd floor. East office now. Do not touch the laptop." She looked at Emily. "Where did he go?" "Not the window. Service stairs, probably. Or he was never planning to leave through this room." Emily turned slowly, looking at the space. The table was against the east wall. The window was north-facing. The door they'd come through faced west. On the south wall, blank except for a ventilation panel that was slightly, almost imperceptibly, not flush with the wall. She crossed to it. It opened at a touch, a utility corridor, unlit, running parallel to the main hallway, wide enough for one person moving carefully. At the far end, the faint sound of a door closing. "He went south," she said. Ramirez radioed it, but they both knew that a man who'd spent 4 years building exit architecture hadn't planned for only one exit, and the building had at minimum 3 stairwells and a loading bay on its south face. "The countdown," Emily said. "What does he have that he could trigger remotely in 14 minutes? Ramirez didn't answer immediately, which meant she was doing the same inventory Emily was doing. All the moving pieces of tonight, everything still unsecured, everyone still in play. "Mara," Emily said, "your contact confirmed she's safe." "My contact confirmed the 2 men left her building. That's not the same thing as safe." Emily was already moving toward the stairwell. If Voss built a contingency, if Hale was the primary and this building was the secondary, and there's a tertiary we haven't identified yet, Carter, call Nathan. Tell him to get to Callaway. She hit the stairwell door. Tell him the countdown is 14 minutes. She was back in the ER in under 4 minutes, which was fast enough to make Wolf stare and Daria take 3 steps toward her before stopping when she read Emily's face. "Your phone," Emily said to Daria. "Now." Daria handed it over without asking. Emily dialed Mara's cell. It rang 5 times and went to voicemail. Asleep? Phone on silent? The normal explanation. The terrifying explanation, both simultaneously possible. She called the building supervisor number she'd memorized from the property management site she'd looked up during the 25 minutes she'd been waiting for her contact's call back earlier. 3 rings. "Yeah." A man's voice, sleep rough. "This is Emily Carter. My sister is a tenant in Unit 4C. I need you to do a wellness check right now. I know it's the middle of the night, and I will pay whatever it costs. I need someone at her door in the next 10 minutes. A pause. "Lady, it's 4 in the morning. I know what time it is. Someone was watching her building tonight. I have reason to believe she may be in danger." She kept her voice level with effort. "Please." Another pause, shorter. "Give me 5 minutes." "Thank you." She held the phone and waited. The ER was quiet around her. The particular post-crisis quiet of a unit that had handled something large and was now in its aftermath, patients sleeping or resting, the overnight staff in the reduced motion mode of 4 a.m. Braddock appeared at her elbow. "Anything I can do?" "Stay close." He did. Nathan called at the 13-minute mark of the countdown. She'd been counting in her head, which was something she'd learned to do in situations where there were no clocks and timing mattered. "I have a team moving to Callaway," he said. "Ramirez coordinated with local law enforcement. They'll be at the building in 17 minutes. There may not be 17 minutes. I know. The local unit is already closer and 8 minutes out. They're moving now." "Any ID on Voss?" He cleared the building. They found a vehicle registered to a shell company in the south parking structure. "It's already gone." His voice was tight. "Emily, what was on the countdown?" "I don't know. Ramirez's tech team is on the laptop." She paused. "It's not a bomb. He's not that crude. It's information, some kind of release, some kind of trigger on a system, whatever he's been holding over people." The dead man file. Or something else. He mentioned the file to control me. He could have a second system for a different purpose, something that activates in response to his arrest, or Hale's, or the investigation reaching a certain level of exposure. She stopped. "Or it's a location." A location. If I'm the primary threat to his freedom, if my testimony and the recording are what actually damages him, then the countdown isn't about releasing information. It's about me. She said it flatly, the way you said something you'd already accepted. Mara isn't the leverage anymore. She was the leverage while he thought I could be controlled. Once he realized I was recording the call, the leverage changes. Where does it change to? She looked around the ER, at the patients, at the staff, at the soldiers from Larkspur who were still in bays around the room, some awake, some not. "Here," she said. "It changes to here." She was already moving toward Daria when her phone, Daria's phone, buzzed in her hand. Not a call. A text from the building supervisor in Callaway. Knocked on 4C. No answer. Door is unlocked. She's not in the apartment. Ramirez called 11 seconds later. Her voice was controlled, but what was underneath it was not. The countdown hit 0, she said. The laptop triggered a file send to a list of recipients. We're tracing them now. And we just got a call from Callaway PD. Your sister's car is gone from the garage. A pause. There's a note on her kitchen table, handwritten. What does it say? Ramirez read it. Stonebridge University, basement of the Harwick building. Come alone or not at all. V. Emily stood in the middle of the Riverside Veterans Medical Center ER with Daria's phone in her hand and the sound of the overnight monitors around her and the weight of everything that had happened in the last 5 hours sitting somewhere behind her ribs. Stonebridge University was 40 minutes from Ashford. Harwick building, she knew the name, she'd grown up 20 miles from that campus. She'd walked past that building as a child, the old sciences building, 6 floors above ground and 3 below. The subterranean levels used for storage and decommissioned lab space that nobody visited. 3 levels below ground. In a building Voss had chosen. A man who spent 4 years building architecture didn't choose a location without knowing what the architecture looked like. She called Nathan back. He has Mara, Stonebridge University, Harwick building basement. She was already pulling off her hospital ID badge. Don't let Ramirez go in loud. He'll hear it coming. Emily? Tell her I know the building layout. Tell her I'm 20 minutes out if I leave now. She looked at Braddock. He looked back at her with the expression of a man who has already made his decision and is waiting for the conversation to catch up to it. And tell her that whatever he sent from that laptop, whatever his dead man file is, deal with it after. It can wait. The people in that file can't wait. If it's already been sent... Nathan, she kept her voice steady. My sister can't wait either. A beat. 15 minutes, he said. Give me 15 minutes to get there first. Drive fast. She was already at the ambulance bay doors when Wolf stepped into her path. Not aggressively. He just stepped there in his white coat with a look on his face that was not the Wolf from the beginning of the night. Where are you going? He asked. I have to go. There are still patients who... Dr. Keegan has them. Daria has them. She looked at him directly. You have them. You're a good doctor, Wolf. You just needed to stop talking long enough to remember that. He blinked. She went around him. The ambulance bay was cold. Braddock fell into step beside her without being asked. You don't have to come, she said. I know, he said. They got into Daria's car. Daria had pressed the keys into Emily's hand somewhere in the last 60 seconds, without being asked for them either, which was the thing about people in crisis situations that Emily had always found both surprising and not surprising at all. When it mattered, people showed you who they were. She pulled out of the parking lot. On the 3rd floor of the building across the street, Ramirez's team was still working through whatever Adrian Voss had left behind. A warm thermal mug, a locked laptop, a ventilation panel left slightly ajar. The countdown had hit 0. And somewhere beneath Stonebridge University's Harwick building, in the decommissioned basement that nobody visited, Mara Carter was sitting in the dark waiting for her sister to come, not knowing that the man who'd put her there had spent 4 years building the kind of trap that you didn't walk out of unless you already knew exactly where every wall was. The drive to Stonebridge took 38 minutes because Braddock knew a route that cut through the industrial district south of Ashford and bypassed the 2 stretches of highway that would have added 6 minutes each. He didn't explain how he knew it. Emily didn't ask. Some knowledge came from places you didn't talk about on the way to somewhere urgent. She drove. He navigated. The radio stayed off. At the 20-minute mark, Nathan called. I'm 3 minutes from the campus perimeter. Ramirez has a team staged at the north entrance. 6 agents, 2 tactical. She's holding position until she hears from you. Tell her to stay outside until I make contact inside. She's not going to like that. I know. Tell her anyway. Emily took the turn Braddock pointed to. The basement of Harwick has 3 access points. Main stairwell from the lobby, a service elevator on the east face, and a utility access in the sub-basement that connects to the university's underground maintenance corridor. If he hears tactical boots in that stairwell, he has 2 other ways out, and we lose him. And you walking in alone is better how? He invited me. He didn't invite 6 federal agents. She paused. He wants to talk. Men who just want to run don't leave handwritten notes. Nathan was quiet for a moment. He has a dead man switch. Ramirez's team confirmed. The laptop triggered a secondary system when the countdown hit 0. It sent a packet to an encrypted server, not to the recipients list. The recipients list was a bluff. The real system is a remote detonator linked to something in Harwick. The word landed in the car like a stone in still water. Explosives, she said. Harwick's basement has been flagged by campus facilities for decommissioned chemical storage. Nothing weapons grade on its own, but Ramirez's EOD contact says with the right combination and a sufficient initiating charge. He stopped. He built a room, Emily. He chose that location for a reason. She thought about the architecture. 4 years of building exit options, layers of insulation, people positioned to absorb consequence. A man who had survived every previous version of this situation by making the cost of pursuing him higher than the cost of letting him go. He'd run out of those layers tonight. Hale was in custody. His location was known. His financial trail was being pulled apart by forensic accountants in a federal building somewhere. What he had left was a room, a woman inside it, and a switch. Does Ramirez have EOD on site? She asked. 2 minutes behind me. Then get them to the utility access in the sub-basement. Maintenance corridor entrance is on the east side of the building, below grade. If he triggers it, I want someone who can do something about it within reach. She exhaled. And Nathan? Yeah. Don't come in until I say. He didn't answer that. Nathan. I heard you, he said, which was not the same as agreeing, and they both knew it. The Harwick building was the oldest structure on Stonebridge's campus. 6 floors of mid-century academic architecture, all heavy stone and narrow windows. The kind of building that looked like it had been designed to outlast every idea ever generated inside it. At this hour, it was dark except for the security lighting at the main entrance and a faint glow from somewhere below ground level that Emily saw when she came around the east face on foot, having left Daria's car 2 blocks back. Braddock was behind her. She'd told him to stay with the car. He'd gotten out and followed her anyway, and she'd made the calculation that arguing with a staff sergeant in the dark outside a building where her sister was being held was not the best use of the next 4 minutes, so she'd let it go. The main entrance was unlocked. The lobby was empty. Security desk unoccupied. The campus ran skeleton security overnight, and whoever had been stationed here had either been sent elsewhere or had found a reason to be somewhere else, which told her Voss had prepared this space before tonight, possibly days before. The explosion at Larkspur, the photograph of Mara, the presence in the parking lot, all of it had been sequential steps in a plan that had Harwick at its end point. She took the main stairwell down. The first basement level smelled of old machinery and dust. Storage racks, decommissioned equipment covered in canvas, the particular stillness of a space that hadn't been regularly occupied in years. The second level was darker. The emergency lighting was sparser, and the smell had changed to something chemical, faint but present. The kind of background odor that made the back of your throat register it before your brain named it. The third level had a light, not overhead fluorescence, a portable lamp, the kind you set on a surface, battery-powered, throwing a wide circle of yellow against the concrete walls. The space was large, the ceiling low, support columns at intervals. Old lab benches along the walls, some with equipment still on them under yellowed plastic sheets. At the center of the room, a chair. In the chair, a woman with her hands bound behind her and a piece of tape across her mouth and her eyes wide open, tracking Emily the moment she came through the stairwell door. Mara. She was breathing. She was upright. Emily ran the assessment automatically, the way she always ran it, top to bottom. Unhurt in any visible way, pupils responsive to the light, no signs of trauma beyond the binding and the tape, and the specific expression on her face that was somewhere between terror and the furious, particular anger of someone who has been made helpless and has not accepted it. Mara looked like Emily the way siblings sometimes looked like each other. Not identical, but something shared in the jaw and the eyes, some underlying architecture that became obvious when they were in the same room. Emily took 3 steps into the room and stopped. That's far enough. The voice came from her left, from behind a column she hadn't cleared. She turned. Adrian Voss was older in person than his voice had suggested on the phone. 70, perhaps, or close to it, with the upright posture of career military that hadn't entirely left him despite the years. White-haired, as she'd seen through the window. His face had the deep-lined quality of someone who had spent decades making decisions that cost something, and who had paid those costs in the specific currency of not sleeping well. He was holding a device in his right hand, small, black, the kind of thing that looked like a remote but wasn't. His thumb was on a button that he was not pressing. "You came alone," he said. "I came with the building supervisor's key code," she said. "You didn't lock the main entrance. I left it open for you." He looked at her steadily. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "You took my sister." "Yes." He said it without apology, but also without satisfaction. "I needed you here. Not Ramirez, not Cross. You." He glanced at the stairwell door behind her. "Who came with you?" "Nobody you need to worry about." His eyes stayed on the door for a moment, then moved back to her. "There's a charge set in this room. 3 points, east wall, north support column, and behind the bench along the south face. It won't bring the building down. It will bring this level down." His voice was completely level. "The device in my hand controls the initiator." "I know." "Then you understand the situation." "I understand that you built a room and put my sister in it and waited for me." She looked at him directly. "I don't understand what you want from it. You're not a man who does things without an endpoint." Something moved in his expression. Not quite surprise, but the recalibration of someone encountering an analysis that matches their own. "I want you to hear me," he said, "before this is over. Whatever happens after. I want one person who was actually there, who actually understands what was at stake, to hear the full version." His jaw tightened slightly. "Not Ramirez's version, not what gets read into a federal record. Mine." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the nearest lab bench and sat on it. Not close to him. Across the room, 12 feet of concrete between them. She folded her hands in her lap. "Talk," she said. "Book." He talked for 11 minutes. She let him. She listened the way she'd learned to listen in situations where the information mattered more than the impulse to respond, fully, without planning her next words, tracking the architecture of what he said against what she already knew. The operation had begun, he said, as a legitimate black-budget program. Assets moved through gray channels to strategic partners in a theater where conventional supply lines were politically impossible. The authorization had come from a level above his. He had implemented. For 2 years, it had worked. Materiel reached the partners who needed it, the strategic objectives were met, and nobody asked about the paperwork because the paperwork existed in a classification level where almost nobody had access. The Larkspur ambush had not been planned. He said this again, as he'd said it on the phone, but in more detail. One of the partners, a faction leader whose interests had shifted, had used information about the scheduled route to position a force. The American patrol had been carrying communications equipment that the faction didn't want to let through. 8 soldiers had died in a contact that lasted 14 minutes. By the time he found out, the cover-up had already begun. Not by him, below him, by people who panicked and made decisions that seemed containable at the time and were not. He had then made the decision to manage the containment rather than dismantle it. He described this decision without flinching, which was either honesty or the particular deadness of someone who had been living with a decision so long that its moral weight had normalized. Emily had filed her report. Emily had been listed as deceased. He said that last sentence and stopped. He looked at her. "I told you I didn't authorize that," he said. "You told me. I don't know if I believe you." "I didn't." For the first time, something cracked slightly in his voice. Not much. "I found out 6 weeks later. By then, there were 3 people between me and whoever made the call. I couldn't reverse it without exposing the entire operation." He paused. "I told myself it was contained, that you were alive somewhere, that it wasn't—" He stopped again. "I told myself a lot of things." The room was very quiet. Mara was watching Emily with an expression that Emily couldn't fully read from across the room. Something between confusion and the dawning understanding of someone who has just realized that the sister she thought she knew had an entire other life running parallel. "You built the dead man file to protect yourself," Emily said. "Not the operation, not the people in it, yourself." "Yes. And the system you triggered tonight, the packet you sent from the laptop, where did that actually go?" A pause. "A server? Whose?" Another pause. Longer. "Mine." She looked at him. He looked back at her, and in his eyes was something she hadn't expected. Not defiance, not calculation, just the exhaustion of a man who has been maintaining a structure for 4 years and has finally run out of the energy to maintain it. "There is no release," she said. "There's no file going to recipients. There's no information that damages Ramirez's chain of command." He didn't answer. "The dead man file was the same as the lit window in the office building," she said. "It was a thing you wanted us to see. The threat of it was the weapon, not the thing itself." She stood up from the bench. "You're out of leverage, Colonel." "I have this." He raised the device slightly. "You do." She looked at it. "And if you use it, you die in this basement, and my sister dies in this basement, and the 8 soldiers who died at Larkspur never get a public accounting, and every decision you made goes into a federal record that describes you only by its worst chapter. No context, no version of events, just the outcome." She took one step toward him. Not a threatening step, the kind of step that people take when they need to be a little closer to something real. "Or you put it down. You talk to Ramirez. You give her the full account, the authorization above you, the people who panicked and made the containment decisions, the faction leader who positioned that force. You give her something real, and the record has your cooperation in it alongside everything else." "I'll still go to prison." "Almost certainly. I'm 71 years old." "I know." He looked at her. She looked at him. The portable lamp between them threw their shadows long and uneven against the concrete. "I'm tired," he said. It wasn't self-pity, it was just true. "I know that too," she said. The device lowered. Not all the way. His thumb stayed near the button, the last reflex of a man who'd spent a career not giving up positions without something in return. But it lowered. "The charges," she said. "How do I disarm them?" "You don't. EOD does." He reached into his jacket with his left hand slowly and produced a second device, smaller, toggle switch, and held it out. "This is the safety. Flip it up, the initiator is locked. EOD can take their time." She crossed the room and took it, flipped the toggle. A small red light on the device went from solid to blinking, which she took to mean what he said it meant. She turned to the stairwell door. "Braddock." The door opened. Braddock came through, and behind him Nathan Cross, who had apparently decided at some point in the last 38 minutes that his definition of waiting outside had some flexibility in it. Behind Nathan, 2 people in EOD gear who moved immediately toward the east wall without being told. Nathan looked at Emily. She was still holding the safety toggle. She was standing 12 feet from Adrian Voss, who was sitting on the floor now, the detonator beside him, his hands open and visible, looking like a man who has set down something heavy that he carried too long. "You okay?" Nathan asked. "I'm fine." She moved to Mara, pulled the tape from her mouth as carefully as she could manage, began working on the binding at her wrists. Mara said nothing for a moment, just breathed, the deep, ragged breath of someone who has been holding it for a long time. Then, "Emily, I'm here." "What?" Mara's voice broke and she reset it. "What is all of this? Who are these people? Who is he?" "I'll explain everything." Emily got the last of the binding free. Mara's hands came forward and she gripped Emily's wrists hard enough to hurt. Emily didn't move away from it. "All of it, I promise. You said you were a nurse." "I am a nurse." Mara looked at her with the expression of someone assembling a picture from pieces that don't fit the frame they'd built. "You're also something else." "Yeah," Emily said. "I'm also something else." Voss was taken into federal custody at 5:47 in the morning. He walked out of the Harwick building's main entrance between 2 federal agents, his hands cuffed in front, his posture still upright, in the automatic way of someone for whom posture was involuntary. Ramirez met them at the door. She looked at him the way someone looked at the end of something long. Not satisfied exactly, but done. The specific expression of done. EOD cleared the basement in 40 minutes. 3 charges, as Voss had said. Not sophisticated, the kind of thing built from available materials rather than military-grade equipment, which told her he'd assembled it himself and recently. He'd been planning this contingency for weeks, not years. The Larkspur explosion had been the trigger. When the investigation started closing in faster than he'd anticipated, he'd moved to the exit option. The exit option had been her, getting her here, in this room, where he could say what he wanted to say to someone who would understand it. She thought about that on the drive back to Ashford, not about the room or the charges or the device, about the impulse behind it. A man at the end of his constructed world wanting to be heard by the one person who had the most reason not to listen. She didn't know what to do with that. She suspected she wouldn't know for a while, and that was okay. Some things didn't resolve quickly. Some things you just carry differently over time. Mara sat in the passenger seat. Braddock had taken the back without comment and said almost nothing for the first 20 minutes. Then, "How long?" "How long what?" "How long have you been carrying all of this?" Emily kept her eyes on the road. "Since the ambush, 3.5 years. And you didn't tell me. I was trying to keep you outside of it." "That worked out really well," Mara said, with a dryness that was so specifically her sister's voice, so perfectly the tone Mara had used on her since they were teenagers, that Emily felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been holding rigid. "No," Emily said, "it didn't. I had 2 men outside my building. I know. I woke up to a stranger in my kitchen telling me to come with him or someone would hurt my sister. I know, Mara. You owe me an extremely long conversation. I know that too." She glanced over. Mara was looking out the windshield, jaw set, eyes dry in the way of someone who has already done their crying and is now in the phase that comes after. "I'm sorry, I thought invisible was safe." "You made yourself dead," Mara said quietly. "In the records, to keep me from worrying." "Yes. That's the stupidest thing you've ever done, and you once drove us into a ditch trying to change a CD." Emily laughed. It came out rough and not quite right, and it surprised her. Mara reached across and put her hand on Emily's arm. Neither of them said anything else for the rest of the drive. The federal case moved fast in the way that federal cases moved fast when the evidence had been thoroughly constructed by an investigator who'd been doing the construction for months. Ramirez's team filed charges within 18 hours. The documentation from Hale's financial trail, the recording Emily had made in the consultation room, Nathan's field testimony, and Voss's own cooperation, which began haltingly and then with increasing specificity on his second day in federal holding, built a case that the U.S. Attorney's Office described, in a press briefing that Emily watched on a laptop in her apartment, as one of the most comprehensively documented military corruption prosecutions in the past decade. Victor Hale was charged with conspiracy, bribery, obstruction of justice, and making criminal threats. He entered a plea that his attorney framed as cooperation and that Ramirez's office accepted on the condition that Hale provided full identification of every individual connected to the original weapons transfer authorization. He did. The list had 11 names. Of the 11, 4 were current officials. All 4 were placed on administrative leave within 72 hours. 2 resigned before charges were formally filed. The other 2 were indicted in the second wave of prosecutions, 10 days after the initial arrests. Colonel Adrian Voss was charged under federal statutes covering conspiracy to commit murder for the conditions that led to the Larkspur ambush, along with a list of lesser charges that ran to 3 pages. He had, as Emily had told him he would, cooperated. His cooperation provided the authorization chain above him, 2 names, both retired, both of whom had believed themselves permanently insulated by classification levels and friendly relationships in the right offices. Those relationships did not survive federal warrants. At the preliminary hearing, Voss appeared on camera for the first time, walked into the courthouse in a suit he'd clearly had for years, upright, moving with the same posture he'd had in the basement of Harwick. He did not speak to the press. He looked straight ahead. Emily watched the footage on her phone in the break room at Riverside and felt nothing dramatic. Not triumph, not grief, just the quiet acknowledgement of a thing having reached its end. The families of the 8 soldiers killed in the Larkspur ambush were notified directly by the Inspector General's office. Ramirez called Emily afterward to tell her. She said the notifications had been the hardest part of the whole investigation, which Emily believed, because some things didn't have a version that wasn't hard. The conversation with hospital administration happened on a Tuesday, 9 days after the events at Riverside. Gerald Fitch sat across from Emily in his office, with the particular expression of a man who had spent a week and a half revising his understanding of a situation and was not entirely finished. "We'd like to offer you a permanent position," he said. "Full-time. Days, if you prefer. The compensation would be—" He named a number that was significantly above her current rate. "I appreciate that," Emily said. "You've been an asset to this unit. What happened during the Larkspur incident? I did my job." "You did considerably more than your job." She looked at him. He looked at her. The office was quiet. "I'd like to stay on nights for now," she said, "if that's still available." Fitch blinked. "You want nights?" "I like nights. The pace is different. The team knows how to work together." She paused. "And I'm not done learning this hospital." He agreed to nights. He shook her hand with both of his, which she found slightly excessive, but let happen. She went back to the floor. The formal military ceremony was small, which was how she asked for it. A room at the Fort Larkspur Administrative Building, 12 people present, no press. Nathan was there, his eye properly bandaged now, the concussion managed with the reluctant cooperation of someone who had finally agreed to spend 3 consecutive days horizontal. Ramirez attended in civilian clothes. Braddock was there, with Torres and 2 other soldiers from the Larkspur incident who'd asked to come and been given permission. Mara sat in the second row and watched with the expression she'd been wearing for 9 days, the one that was still reassembling the picture. Emily's service record was formally reinstated, not quietly, not with the bureaucratic minimum, reinstated completely with a correction notation that described the prior status as erroneously recorded, which was the official language for what had been done to her and which was, she thought, a masterpiece of understatement. The commendation that had existed in classified records was read into the public record. Her combat medic badge was returned to her, an actual physical badge, produced from somewhere, worn at the edges in a way that suggested it had been kept rather than discarded. She held it for a moment after they gave it to her. It was lighter than she remembered. The officer conducting the ceremony said things that were correct and appropriately formal, and she listened to them with the surface of her attention, while the part of her that was paying deeper attention noticed Nathan's expression. Not proud exactly. More like relieved. The specific relief of someone who has been carrying someone else's wrong for a long time and has finally been able to set it down. Mara was crying. Quietly, her hand pressed flat against her own sternum, not looking away. Emily looked at her and held the look. She didn't smile. Smiling felt wrong for what this was. She just looked, and Mara looked back, and between them was the full weight of 3.5 years of Emily being invisible and Mara not knowing why, and the thing that came after that weight, which was not resolution exactly, but was its own kind of truth. Afterward, in the parking lot, Mara said, "Are you going to tell me all of it now? The actual all of it?" "Yes." "Over dinner?" "Over a very long dinner." "I'm ordering the expensive thing." "Order whatever you want." Mara looked at her for a moment. The afternoon light was flat and warm, the kind of Texas light that didn't do anything dramatic, just was what it was. "You could have told me. Earlier, I mean, not everything, but that you were okay, that you were alive somewhere and okay." "I know." Emily looked at the badge in her hand. "I thought protecting you meant keeping you outside of it. I didn't think about what it cost you to be outside of it. It cost a lot. I know that now." She closed her hand around the badge. "I'm not going to disappear again." Mara nodded. She didn't say she believed it immediately, which was honest and which Emily respected. "Okay," Mara said. "Expensive dinner." "Expensive dinner," Emily agreed. 3 weeks after the Larkspur incident, Ramirez called on a Thursday evening. Emily was in her apartment, the first real quiet she'd had. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee she was actually drinking rather than holding for appearances. "I have something for you," Ramirez said. "An offer. Formal. From the IG's office." Emily set down the coffee. "What kind of offer?" "Advisory. Part-time initially. We have cases that involve medical facilities, military medical personnel, situations where someone who has your particular combination of backgrounds would be useful." A pause. "It's not glamorous. A lot of document review, consultation calls, occasional field work. The pay is federal scale, which means it's not great." Emily looked at the table. At the badge she'd set there when she came in, next to her keys, next to a plant Mara had brought over last weekend because Mara had said everyone needed at least one living thing in their house, and clearly Emily had been focused on other priorities. "I'm still a nurse," she said. "I'm not giving that up." "The advisory position wouldn't require you to." Ramirez's voice was careful and precise, as it always was. "In fact, it would be better if you weren't. A working nurse with your background has a different kind of access and credibility than a federal consultant." Emily thought about Corporal Desmond, whose hemothorax she'd caught before it became catastrophic, about the patient in Bay 7 who'd coded because someone anchored on the wrong diagnosis, about the soldiers from Larkspur sleeping in Riverside's bays, trusting that the people moving around them in scrubs knew what they were doing. She thought about what it meant to be useful. Not visible, not celebrated, useful, present in the places where presence mattered. "Send me the paperwork," she said. "Already in your email," Ramirez said, and Emily could hear in her voice that she'd known what the answer would be before she made the call. On the first of the following month, Emily Carter walked into Riverside Veterans Medical Center at the start of her night shift and clipped her badge to her scrubs the way she'd done it for 19 months. The badge had her name, her photo, her department. It looked the same as it had always looked. She was not the same as she had always looked. Not dramatically different. She hadn't changed her hair or started wearing different shoes or made any of the visible adjustments that people made when they wanted to announce that something in them had shifted. She just carried herself with a slightly different relationship to the space around her, less compressed, less careful about how much room she took up. Daria was at the desk when she came in. They had not had a formal conversation about the events at Riverside. Daria wasn't a woman who required formal conversations about things she'd witnessed and processed on her own. She looked up from her chart, looked at Emily, looked back at her chart. "Bay 3 has a chest pain we're watching," she said, "and there's a new resident starting tonight who I need you to not intimidate." "I don't intimidate people." "You didn't used to intimidate people," Daria said, without looking up. "Now you walk in a room and people notice. It's different." She turned a page. "I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying don't terrify the new resident before she finds her feet." Emily went to the locker room. She changed her shoes. She stood at the sink for a moment and looked at herself in the mirror, which was something she'd never particularly done before shifts. It hadn't felt worth the time. She looked tired. She looked like someone who'd been through something. Both of those things were true and neither of them was a problem. She went back out to the floor. Wolf was near Bay 3, reviewing the chest pain patient's EKG, and he looked up when she came out of the locker room corridor. He'd been different with her since the night of the Larkspur incident. Not deferential, which she wouldn't have wanted, but attentive in a way that was less about status and more about genuine engagement. He asked her questions now. He listened to the answers. "What do you think?" he said, holding out the EKG strip without preamble. She looked at it. "The ST segment is borderline. I'd run a second troponin in an hour and not move him anywhere until you have it." "That's what I was thinking." "Then trust what you were thinking." He nodded. He went to the patient. She went to the rest of the floor. The night unfolded the way nights unfolded. Not smoothly, not dramatically, but in the genuine rhythm of a place that handled real things. A child with a high fever whose parents were terrified. An elderly man with a fall injury who had 3 different versions of how the fall had happened, and none of them quite matched the bruising pattern. A woman in early labor whose OB was 40 minutes out and who needed someone calm in the room with her, which Emily provided for the 15 minutes it took for the actual obstetrics team to arrive. At 2 in the morning, she sat in the break room with a cup of coffee and the new resident, a young woman named Sasha, who had the look of someone 1 month into a process that was dismantling and rebuilding her simultaneously, and answered questions for 20 minutes about how to read a patient who wasn't telling you the full story. "You look for the delta," Emily said, "the gap between what they're saying and what their body is doing. People are usually more honest physically than verbally, not because they're lying, but because they're managing what they think you need to know, what they're scared to say, what they've normalized that they shouldn't have. Your job is to close the gap." Sasha wrote it down in the small notebook she carried, which Emily found both touching and practical. "How do you know when you've closed it?" "You don't always. Sometimes you make the best call you can with what you have, and you find out later whether you were right." She drank her coffee. "You get better at it. You don't get perfect at it. Anyone who tells you they got perfect at it is telling you they stopped paying attention." Sasha nodded slowly. She was going to be good at this, Emily thought. She had the right kind of uncertainty, the kind that asked questions instead of hiding. Emily finished her shift at 7 in the morning. She stood outside the ambulance bay in the early light, the Texas heat already suggesting itself in the air, though the sun wasn't high yet, and looked at the parking lot. Ordinary. Cars arriving. The day shift beginning its approach. 3 weeks ago, federal vehicles had boxed in a silver sedan in the far corner, and Victor Hale had looked at her from the back seat with the expression of a man whose architecture had finally met its load limit. 6 weeks ago, she had been a floor nurse who was too slow for real emergencies, and the worst thing in her day had been a young doctor who talked without thinking. She thought about the 8 soldiers. She thought about Corporal Desmond and his brother who had come home. She thought about Mara ordering the expensive thing at dinner, laughing at something Emily said, crying on the way home in the car with the window down because she said the air helped, which Emily understood. She thought about what it meant to have been invisible for 3.5 years and to have decided in the space of one night to stop. Invisibility had felt like safety. It had felt like protection. What it had actually been was a way of disappearing before anyone could take anything else from her, because what they'd taken the first time, her record, her name, her status, the acknowledgement that she had existed and served and nearly died, had been so specific and so total that rebuilding visibility had felt like asking to be taken again. But you didn't protect people by disappearing. You protected them by being present, by being the person in the room who caught the thing everyone else missed, by refusing to make yourself smaller than the moment required. She had learned that the hard way. She had learned it in a basement in Stonebridge, standing across from an old man who had built walls so thick he'd forgotten there was a world outside them, realizing that she had almost done the same thing with different materials. The badge was in her pocket. Her keys were in her hand. Mara was alive in Callaway, teaching middle school biology, texting Emily at unreasonable hours with updates about her students in the way she'd been doing before and would continue doing now. Nathan Cross was somewhere in the process of a recovery that he was managing badly and would manage adequately and had not asked for help with, which was its own kind of familiar. Ramirez's paperwork was on her kitchen table, waiting. Emily walked to her car. She got in. She drove home through the early morning streets of Ashford, Texas, through a city that didn't know what had happened in its hospital 3 weeks ago, or know her name, or have any particular feeling about the nurse who drove these streets at shift change. That was fine. She didn't need the city to know. She knew. Nathan knew. Mara knew. The soldiers from Larkspur knew, and the families of the ones who hadn't made it back knew, and Ramirez's federal record would eventually know in the dry, complete language of official documentation. And in Bay 12 of Riverside's ER, there was a file notation from that night that read, "In the clinical language of medical records, hemothorax identified by nursing staff prior to physician assessment. Timely intervention contributed to patient stabilization." It was a small notation, factual. It would never be read by anyone who wasn't looking for it. She found it, weeks later, pulling chart records for the IG advisory work. She read it once. She closed the file. Some things didn't need to be loud to be true. Her name was Emily Carter. She had served. She had been buried. She had survived the burial, and she had come back. Not to prove something to the people who'd written her off, but because the work existed and she was good at it, and the world needed people who were willing to be present for the hard versions of things. She was not finished being that person. She was, in fact, just getting started.